Hey everybody, welcome to the Jim and Sam Town Square. I'm Chris Cangelo, and you're probably thinking, Chris doesn't normally do these intros. Where's Scott King? Well, my co-host is away, but trust me, we'll be okay. I'll take you through it as we recap week 2 of March 2024. And the boys kicked off the week with Jim's Northern California trip and his gigs out there. But Jim kind of had an issue in his return to the airport on Sunday. You see, he set an alarm for in the 2 o'clock hour, but it was daylight savings time, and that switch doesn't allow for a 2 o'clock hour. So that hour never happened, and his alarm didn't go off. But I guess it went off later on in three o'clock in the morning because he had a long drive from his hotel to the airport in San Francisco. And the thing is that, when Jim flies, we know what he wears. We are curious about when he drives, but Jim, assured us all that he does wear underwear when he's on a road trip, just doesn't wear it on, flights. Jim was so concerned about his trip to the airport. So shocker, right? That he loves traveling at night. He said it's the best time to travel. He does it all the time for his gigs. And so he, got up early and drove back that morning to get to the airport. I hate driving at night. I'd rather get up, and leave at 4 in the morning. So you get a couple hours of nighttime driving before it gets sunlight, just because I don't want to, I just get tired. I just get tired at night. So I'd rather drive when the sun is out. But Jim's drive had some issues because some of the roads were like closed due to some police activity. They didn't know what was really going on. And Sam said he had a similar experience with construction. And I think it always screws things up when you're traveling and you don't know. And you try to check your apps that you use for traveling, like Waze or Google Maps or whatever. And sometimes they work, as Jim said, you see the red and it's like, oh yeah, great, I'm getting there faster. You try to beat it. But I had the issue when I was driving back from my Thanksgiving trip to Denver. We were returning to Chicago. We left in the morning. We're about 2 hours into our trip, and Waze added like a few more hours and had us get off the highway. And I'm like, this can't be right. Thank God I had my wife with me because like, okay, please check Google Maps, check Apple Maps, see what's going on and seeing if they're rerouting us too. They weren't. So sometimes Waze kind of messes up, and you just gotta like, I'm gonna go the way I think I'm supposed to go. Sometimes you get messed up by that as well. So let's get back to the flying part of Jim's trip because Jim said he's getting better with turbulence. Is he? We noticed that that probably wasn't true because the whole week was dominated by air travel talk. With Travis out, Troy had to add some of the things that Jim hates because Travis was out on Monday. So one of the things that Jim hates as they talk about air travel is that 737 MAX. So they added that to the list. And he said he won't fly them. He says he's scared of them. They don't maintain them well. And that led to discussion about the Sioux City crash, which was interesting for me because it's a Colorado connection, both Colorado and Chicago. It was a flight going from Denver to Chicago that ended up crashing in Sioux City, Iowa. And the movie, I realized when they were talking about it, like, there's a movie about this. The movie Fearless was kind of based on it. I don't know if you ever saw that movie with Jeff Daniels. But then I also remembered that there was a sports radio guy in Denver that was on that flight that actually, got that made it home alive, if you will. And his name was Jerry Schimmel. And his real life experience about being on that flight and walking away was kind of what the whole thing of the movie was about in Jeff Daniels' portrayal of him. So he said he was thinking about suing, but he was pretty traumatized, which I can imagine about, that whole, crash. It's devastating if you ever saw the video and walking away from it. That plane was a DC-10, as we talked about. And I remember as a kid, and Jim referred to this too, DC-10s in the 70s, everybody was scared of them. It's like, oh, that's a plane that always crashes. That's a plane. And I never wanted to take one as a kid. Now, I didn't fly hardly until probably I was about 12, as I think it was my first flight. But everybody was scared to do that. And now everybody's kind of getting scared of that 747 or 737 MAX because of all the issues they're having. Sam brought up some cool stuff that his dad used to fly on the Concorde when he was a younger man and in the ad game. And man, Sam's dad might have been a man of means because that was an expensive ticket. Now, I'm sure he didn't have to pay for it himself, but they loved him so much that they put him on the Concorde because they have to get Mr. Roberts to England for this discussion or to the States, whichever way he was going. So that was kind of cool. We got to get him in the studio. Jim had so many questions about the Concorde. I'd love to hear that too. That's one of the things I'd like to hear Jim talk to Mr. Roberts about. That would be kind of cool. And then a pilot called in. I'm not sure if it was that same day or maybe later in the week. As you know, the whole week was dominated by Jim's, air travel. But pilot called in and Jim just demonstrated his expertise in knowing all the terminology and asking his question. And they talked about the flight crew cabin, where they have some sleeping quarters, I guess, where they would crash if they're on a very long flight. And then Jim had some thoughts on what activities might happen in those sleeping quarters. Very funny, very funny. And then later in the week, they talked about the whistleblower in the Boeing case that actually was found dead, and it surprised me that Jim wasn't more concerned about maybe him being suicided, as people say, because of his past comments on the 737 Max. But who knows? That also brought up the TWA bar and hotel that's in JFK or near JFK. I think it's actually in the airport property because they talked about being able just to walk off and go on your flight. So it's a really cool hotel. I think they converted a big plane into a restaurant or a bar or something like that. And there's a cool swimming pool and all this stuff. And Jim said he has to do it. And of course, the guy's like, yes, of course you do. But he confused me. And sometimes I don't understand Jim. I love Jim, but sometimes I don't understand his logic because he said, yeah, I'd have to do it. And the guy's like, yeah, do it when you go on one of your gigs, one of your trips, when you fly out there. He goes, yeah, I'll probably do it. If I do it at all, I'll do it when I come home from my trip. You're not going to do it when you come home. You want, like Travis said, you want to get home after a trip. You're anxious to get home. At least most of us are. The time to do it, of course, is before you leave. You go the day before. You spend a nice day there. You have great dinner. You get up. You go swimming maybe. You get up and then go to your flight in the morning without having to commute. But Jim was, of course, concerned with some things that probably shouldn't be concerned about having a wet swimsuit. Well, what do I do with a wet swimsuit? I got it. Throw it in the trash. Hit my mic there. Sorry. Throw it in the trash. You don't need, you're a man of means. You don't need to bring a swimsuit on the plane. Just throw it away. Buy one and throw it away. It's that easy, He's so crazy. So other topics I went and talked about, it was pretty cool, was the Oscars were over the weekend, and they had a recap on that. Now, thank God they didn't do play-by-play on all of it because those award shows can be tedious, but they did talk about Al Pacino and how he was blowing it. And it was so funny because he was supposed to announce the nominees. He went right to the winner. And they were making fun of how that happened and never mentioned the nominees. And then they talked about Jimmy Kimmel's joke and, how that he in real time got that Truth Social message from Trump and his live response. That was pretty funny. And then they also talked about Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito, twins that we thought we were going to get a reunion and them talk about that. But they talked about Batman and they did a bit with Michael Keaton. And guess what? Jim hated it. So we had to add it to the list. But Sam liked it. So that's why we talked about it. And then Mike Mantone brought up something that was kind of interesting. We all saw that John Cena came out and he was pretty much naked except for covering his privates with the envelope, a larger envelope. And Montone thought, well, maybe that's part of the Illuminati humiliation. I guess there's some theories going around, but that's what he was doing. He was being, part of the ritual of being humiliated by the Illuminati. Who knows? But it was pretty funny. And then they had that weird article, that article from Newsweek that sparks fury, a phrase that Jim absolutely 100% hates. And he's tired of all the jargon by the media. So they had to, of course, add that to the list. But the article in the Newsweek said, posting said that Kimmel's long movie, he's talking about how long the movies are and had a joke about that, really sparked fury. And the article was posted, get this, in the middle of the show. So how do we know if, fury was sparked? But was the person that wrote the article checking in with everybody in America? Sam always talks about how callers say, we as a group decide that you guys shouldn't do this. Like, oh, really? Did you go and talk to all the other listeners? No, you decided that this is not right for you or whatever it is. So, the article came out, and most likely it was probably written by AI, and it already had, most of it written, and they just triggered it out, just kind of sent it out. And I wish Scott King, my great co-host that you all know, and a great writer, or doing those Forbes articles, was here because I want to know, does he write articles and have them, in the chamber ready to go? And then if something happens, he can just go, boom, let's put that one out. I don't know if he does have that. I would assume that maybe, he does. Who knows? But yeah, I wouldn't, like, he wouldn't do it. No way. He's a good writer. He's not AI, right? Of course he's not AI. But speaking of AI, we remember that AI article that came out about, Jim, and that Jim was the one that was transitioning, and not that he married somebody who did transition, that Jim was the one that was transitioning. Well, we did hear about Jim becoming Jamina. What's that all about? I can't wait. Jim said that one time Nikki dressed him up as Jamina, and they enjoyed that. He said there's photos and maybe a video too. Oh, please, God, yes. We have to see at least a photo of that. Please, Jim, please. And then they, transitioned and talked about the State of the Union, which happened as well. And of course, they talked about Senator Katie Britt of Alabama, or is it Costa Rica? Troy had a little challenge on that. Not really, but they thought that he thought that they wanted to know where some things happened in Costa Rica, and he said that she was from Costa Rica. Nope. But anyway, Senator Katie Britt from Alabama was doing the GOP response and to the State of the Union, and it was odd. I think everybody will agree it's just odd. And Scarlett Johansson did a great portrayal on Saturday Night Live that following Saturday. So we have other political news, and a couple stories they discussed was RFK Jr. may have selected a VP candidate. Okay. NFL great and fully immunized Aaron Rodgers could be that candidate, you know, or it could be thank you for your service, Jesse the Mind Ventura. Jim hates all of this. Another thing for the list. He said that it's going to just ruin RFK Jr.'s chances to make any kind of dent. And and he has some good points. He has some bad points, as we all know. So yeah, it's interesting that you'd have to go to, these famous guys to find a VP. And then, of course, talking about Jesse, Jim rehashed the Jesse Ventura studio exchange he had from many years ago. And it was cool to kind of recap that because, some newer listeners don't really remember all these things, but, us veterans, we do. And that was cool. I liked hearing about that again. And then in other political news, they talked about, French President Macron, I think, yeah, Macron's wife. They learned that conservative political contributor or commenter thinks that French President Macron's wife is a man. So, Jim had a little bit of interest in this story. And that led to talk about the same situation with Michelle Obama. And, that they have seen posts that, think that maybe she's a man too. And some of the reasoning behind that is there's no pictures of them when they were pregnant, both Macron's wife as well as Michelle Obama. And Sam brought up a very good point. Those pictures to make it to the internet in that time, back when they were pregnant or had children, there there was no, instant postings of Facebook or anything back then, nor digital cameras. So if you took a picture when you were pregnant, it was on film. And for those pictures to make it to the internet, any pictures we have from our youth, we have to scan them or take a picture of a photo and put it up there. And who's going to go and do that? So good point there, Sam. It's a little far-fetched story, but stranger things have happened, right? And then speaking of social media postings, the guys are talking about how challenging it can be to promote your whatever you got to promote on social media, be it Instagram or TikTok or YouTube, and to create that content that supports your other content, right? And for me, shameless plug, I have that other podcast that we just released our seventh episode on, that podcast of that my brother and I do called Our World War II Dad, which kind of retraces my dad's steps in World War II in Europe. And I spent so much time making a reel just to promote the podcast that we did on YouTube. So it just, this reel took a long time, and doing the podcast. It's a time, it really zaps all the time out of your day to take care of doing all those things. So that led to the guys talking about how they need help. Of course, Jim has hot dog, but hot dog does help with some things. But I said Jim, I meant Sam has hot dog, of course. Sam has hot dog to help him with some things, and he kind of how he farms it out to hot dog and some other people. But Jim was saying, yeah, I just need help. I just need a lot of help, and I can't trust anybody, because you have to trust them in your life as well as, doing good work and turning it in on time. And for me, I love doing this stuff, and I just wish I was in New York City, because I'd be Jimmy's boy. I think we could work something out where he could trust me and we do some good stuff. Anyway, one of the funnier things that happened during the week is Jim was kind of looking through social media and came across this follow of Morbid Knowledge is, I think, the name of the account, and I follow it too, just by chance. I was looking at some of the stuff as well, and Jim discovered there's a guy that is in an iron lung, so it's breathing for him. It's this huge apparatus that he's in his 70s and still using this ancient form of medical device, and he just refuses to do any more modern devices. So they were very interested in talking about that. But then that led to discussion that a caller brought up, that Helen Hunt is in a movie, right? From, I probably think it would probably be like the 90s. So, right, after she was on Mad About You. But she was in a movie where she helps men that are in the kind of situation where they can't move. And let's just say a fog just enveloped the whole studio for Troy and Jim. And of course, everything they were talking about was derailed by that fog. But then the very next day, we learned that the guy, who his name is Paul, so Iron Lung Paul, passed away. And that was kind of weird that that happened right after we were talking about him and going through all those stories. And Jim said that Nikki thinks that maybe he was responsible for his death because of his teasing the day before. Jim, don't you feel bad? I love it. It's so good. It's so good. But maybe it could have been Madonna, because Madonna was seen um, in a video, in a clip, challenging a gentleman to stand up, and chastising him for not standing up during her concert. The guy was in a wheelchair. I mean, no one needs to stand up. No, I don't need to be told to stand up. If I want to stand up, I will. If I don't, I know they're trying to get the crowd going and pumping them up, but Madge. All right, so let's move on to no more, security cams in Airbnbs. They are outlawing security cams. If you're an Airbnb host, can't have them inside anymore. And I was like, well, that makes sense. I mean, as much as us homeowners, would want to do that, you can't. You can't have that. People are living and sleeping in your home. It's like a hotel. Can't have cameras in your room. For me, I have like three, outside that does the driveway and in the backyard and the front door and all that kind of stuff. We know that Jim has a few that he sets up when he goes on trips, and one that, sees the front door. And he was concerned about that. But, the thing is that Jim and myself, we can have as many cameras as we want inside our house or wherever we want, because they are, that's our home. We are not renting it out for anything. Can you imagine if Jim rented out his house? Never going to happen. Never. That penthouse is never going to be rent it out while Jim's living there. But they talk about how you can't do that. I get it when you're an Airbnb, but as a homeowner, I can have that. It's just I wouldn't probably want to put one in the bathroom, but maybe Jim would. They got on this great bit of Jim's fictitious bathroom floor mounted, ring camera or whatever you want to call it. And Jim, being able to tap into that camera and his voice would come over and he would ask people that were using the toilet, "Oh, hold up that paper," to make sure that they wiped well. So disgusting, so funny. It was great. And it just kept on going and going. And I absolutely loved it. So we're going to talk about, the best guests here in a little bit, but I got to take something from one of the guests that he brought up. Greg Stone was in the studio and brought up revenge bedtime procrastination, which is when you sacrifice sleep to be able to do more during the day. Or, if you enjoy some free time, like you work all day, you work all afternoon, you just want to, instead of going to sleep at midnight, you want to watch a couple shows until 3 in the morning. Then you're sacrificing your sleep, instead of doing, instead of sleeping, you're watching shows, which is probably not good. And boy, did that strike a chord with Sam. He actually brought it up later on in the week because he said, "That's me. I do that all the time." And Jim said, "Yep, that's me as well. It's me too. I spend so much time editing and stuff that when I'm done at midnight, and I'm kind of wired, and maybe it's what's true with the other guys is that they're kind of wired. I want to watch a couple shows and go on social media because I haven't been on it for a while, and then go to sleep. So, going to bed at 1 in the morning, getting up at 5:30 does happen from time to time with me. All right, so let's get to best guest of the week. And as far as I can remember, we had three. I already mentioned Greg Stone, and Greg came in. He came in pretty hot too. He talked about, being immortal, right? And it was interesting. But then the funniest part, I think, is what activities people should be doing when they watch Greg's special on YouTube. And let's see how I could say this. He wanted them to write in the comments how long it took to finish your solo job and how long you lasted. That's pretty good. Another guest was, of course, TJ Miller, who now owns his own line of peanut butter. He came in before, I think he had hot sauces and gave everybody that. And now he has peanut butter, and they talked about all of that. He's such an interesting guy, and I really like him because he interacts well with Jim and Sam, like they've been in doing this thing for a long time. He's a really good guest. And then the third guest was Dan St. Germain, who's been in a couple times. And, he works closely with Dan Soder, and he brought up the discussion, and they had a good time talking about, comics that don't admit when they bomb. It's like, just admit it. It happens to everybody. Everybody's not perfect at what they do. God knows I'm not. And so it was fun talking about, how they don't admit when they bomb. And then they brought up Sam. Greg was funny. I'm sorry, Dan was funny, bringing up Sam's old WWE bomb. And I think we saw that on Jim and Sam Dark Dank Means with our friend Miguel, put some of that video up there. So yeah, Sam was struggling. It happens, man. It happens from time to time. And then Dan talked about, when he was relapsing from his drug abuse years, and he asked Sinbad for drugs, help him get drugs, which was kind of funny. But then Dan talked about a turbulent flight he had. Guess what? Interview over. Jim is going on to question all about the turbulence and how it affected him and when it happened and what was going on. So Jim thinks he's better. He's not. He's not much different. All right. You know what? I like them all very much. All those guests were really good, but I think for me, and this is just my personal opinion, I love when TJ Miller's on. He just interacts really well. So I'm going to go with TJ Miller as my best guest of the week. And before we go to line of the week, my favorite ongoing bit on the show from this week is Troy saying, "Bill, welcome to the show. John, welcome to the show." So that's when a caller, whoever it is, calls in, and Jim and Sam says, "Oh yeah, go ahead, Jim. Go, or Mark, or whatever the guy's name is. Go ahead, John." And they don't answer. And Troy pipes in, "John, welcome to the show." Love welcome to the show. Keep it up, Troy. Fabulous time. And we got some good news, but some scary news. Black Adam called in, which it was great to hear from Black Adam. He's been having some health issues and his voice is very hoarse. And he mentioned that he went to the doctor, thought about Jim the whole time he was there, and that he probably needs surgery on his throat that could keep him out of talking for like 6 months, which would be awful, if you can't talk for 6 months. I had a buddy that is a musician that had nodes removed or whatever because he's, was a singer too, and he couldn't talk, so that was hard to engage with him for a while too. All right, let's move on to line of the week. And I have a couple, and I think I have one that Scott probably would have chosen, but I don't know. Scott didn't mention which one he would like, so I'm going to put mine in for Scott, the one that I think is his. But for me, they were talking about his experience in the air. Of course they were, right? And that he was going to get Wi-Fi, but it was $40 for Wi-Fi. And he's like, I'm not doing it. And Jim's a man of means. He could afford it easily, but he's not going to spend that money for that. And of course, he brought it up to the flight attendant because Jim is somewhat of a Karen a little bit. But he brought up the flight attendant about how, it was extraordinary and shouldn't happen. And after they landed, the flight attendant said, because of your issue, I had 5,000 miles added to your account. And Jim thought that was really cool and nice, and Jim said, that flight attendant, she knows what she's doing. I guess she's been with Delta for 45 years, I said. And he said, and so, she knows what she's doing. And he goes, I wish I would have known that because I would have just sat around the whole flight and talked to her about turbulence. And Sam said, and she would have taken that mileage right back. Great line, Sam, and probably very true. But I think my favorite line was when they're talking about this story of the dog that keeps on returning to their owner's bus stop where the owner used to get on the bus and did that after the owner passed away for 9 years. This dog would return for 9 years. And Jim had a funny line about how stupid he thinks the dog is. And he said, if I go to Jersey City and wait around for Patrice every day, that's nuts. I'm not going to do that. His buddy Patrice died a long time. So can you imagine Jim going to, wait in Jersey City for Patrice? Very good. All right. So this one I thought would be Scott's favorite. Of course, he's not here to defend it, but he loves superheroes, right? And it's superhero related. It goes back to when they were talking about Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito presenting that award, and Michael Keaton was there, and, they both were Batman villains. And Danny asked Arnold, how did Batman beat you? And Arnold said, he used my great weakness against me. Without a beat, Jim just jumped in and said, maids? So, very good line. Funny stuff, man. So it was a good week. The guys left a little early. Jim had to travel for his gigs. Something was going on with Sam that he maybe had to do something. I wasn't sure if he was in the studio that day. No, he was in the studio that day. He was in the studio on Wednesday, but he did leave a little early as well. So, that's it for our episode and our recap this week. I wish Scott was here, and I hope that he will be able to join us next week. But I want to thank you all for watching and listening. And I can tell you, it's no fun being here all by yourself. It's a much better place when everyone's here in the town square.
Thanks for watching and listening to the Jim and Sam Town Square. Please remember to like and subscribe and turn on that notification bell, not dog bell, so you don't miss an episode.
And if you're just listening to the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. We really appreciate it.